created my own little algorithms to do one thing or another, like disease states, a mortality algorithm. And
I think you will have a whole levels of robotics, the humanoid robots or non-humanoid robots, whatever the case is.
But the one that I really gravitated towards was Alteryx. Low code, no code, business intelligence stuff, data science, machine learning, things like that.
Audio, the text, and then there's big metaverse bug. Everybody knows the metaverse.
Another week of AI.
What an intro. Love that intro. Welcome to I am not the best one to do this chant, but my co-host is not here today. But I do have three of us here. So we have Dr. Hartman and we have Dr. Marty. What we are talking about today is something that I am very passionate about, but I will let the expert talk. So this is going to be one of those ways that we sit down and just listen and, do some activities with what we need to do, really. Like, that's what we need to do. We'll listen and just go after it. Go do what we have to do about the robotics, right? The robots. These robots are just everywhere these days, right? So how do we prepare ourselves for the future that is coming, right? The robots are going to be in all aspects of our lives, and people are asking a lot of questions, but there's no clear guidance for it. So Dr. Hartman and Marty Strong. Oh man, all right.
Yeah, I got dropped out last time. All of a sudden I found myself looking at the StreamYard link.
I'm not seeing anything that says.
If he pops up, say we decided we didn't need him anymore. So here's that.
Oh my goodness! So I usually, if the StreamYard is having problem, it tells me like, "Hey, we're bandwidth problems." But
yeah, you said like, "Here we go," and then I was looking at a screen with just the StreamYard link. I'm sure he'll pop back in a second.
I'm going to do something. If you go away, just come back in. But I'm going to refresh this page just to clear everything up. Right?
Do you want me to go out and come back in?
No, just stay there. I'm going to just refresh it. But if it kicks you out, just come back in.
Gotcha.
Hey, so it's not Marty Strong's computer. It's literally, I think StreamYard is doing this.
Yeah, I got kicked out and I changed the browser setting. Sorry, I apologize. I don't know what happened.
Good. All right, cool. So one more time, we'll play that video one more time and then we'll get started.
Take two. Sorry, Marty.
Well, I don't think, yeah, exactly. Let's see. Oh, wait. Will it not let me play? Okay. 1 second. Yes.
Welcome in the 21st century. 25th.
So, let's see. Okay. Here we go. We're going to start here.
Created my own little algorithms to do one thing or another, like disease states, a mortality algorithm. And
I think you will have a whole levels of robotics, the humanoid robots or non-humanoid robots, whatever the case is.
But the one that I really gravitated towards was Alteryx. Low code, no code, business intelligence stuff, data science, machine learning, things like that. Audio, the text, and then there's big metaverse bug. Everybody knows the metaverse.
Another week of AI.
All right, another episode of AI. Man, this is going to be so exciting to talk about robots, right? It's an AI podcast, and we cannot separate the robots from AI and AI from the robots. This is going to be a great learning session for everybody. Because we're going to sit down and listen and we're going to do something about it, because there's a lot of questions. People are wondering, what's going to happen to the future state of the world, and how the robots play into that future state. But just because listening doesn't, end it there, right? We have to get involved. And I think Dr. Hartman and Marty Strong, we're going to talk to everybody about what we know and what people need to do in order to get involved. Exciting conversation today. So Dr. Hartman and Marty Strong, welcome to I. How are you guys feeling?
I. Very good.
I'm feeling even more upbeat after you said that.
In all languages, you can say it differently. But so hopefully at the end of this discussion, we will feel more energized to say I versus, I. What are we gonna do? So let's get started. I think the future state of robotics is undeniable at this point, because sometime in 2010s you could have said like, you guys are talking about 2040s, 2050s. But every time you see the NVIDIA GTCs, every time you see those robots from Boston Dynamics, my goodness, they just grew up out of nowhere, like a growth spurt. They're just all of a sudden jumping around, doing all sorts of crazy tricks. So let's get started. Where do we start? I'll let you guys, decide.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll kick it off. The interesting thing to me is kind of the human interface with technology, and over probably the history of humanity, there's always been a shock in the beginning. There's always been a either denial or a rejection of technology. The hope and promise of technology usually isn't the first kind of leading indicator. And nowadays, I think, starting back in the 1940s and 50s with science fiction movies, probably didn't do science and technology much of a service by positioning robots and technology as evil and dark and sinister and always trying to do something to human beings. So I think from that frame of reference, most of the conversations about AI and robotics, especially in older people, give them a sense of concern. In younger people, they're interested, but they don't really see the direct application yet. They're excited with the momentum and the velocity of change, but they haven't seen the applied change. So what I try to do whenever I talk on the subject of robotics or AI, I'll say, just get rid of the word robotics and just say machine. How many machines do you have in your life? How many machines have been programmed to stamp out a very particular type of Tupperware bowl? And when did that start? In the 1940s? I mean, there's been programmable machine activity supporting human outcomes and objectives for a long time. It's just cool if you want to call them a robot. I mean, I don't call my autopilot on an airplane my robot. I don't call my hands-free driving capabilities in a car my robot. And I also don't put a scary AI, sound backtrack every time I turn the car on or jump in an airplane to fly it. So they became tools. They became normal. They're just machines that help us do things. So I usually start with, that's the framework. That's the kind of the honest and also the healthy framework,
Right?
So that you can have your mind opened up a little bit and listen to all the rest of the really cool stuff that's going on.
Very, very good point. I start normally like looking back in history, like the era of behemoth, 1815 to 1920s, the evolution in the industry. And at the beginning, it is, like Marty said, a shockwave going through. And society and the people adapt to it. Assembly line, right? The T model, it's automatically becomes part of the society. The only difference now compared to the time in behemoth is it's so fast. It happens day by day. ChatGPT, the different versions, suddenly a new AI coming into play. And that is overwhelming. So the challenge is, it's a positive challenge, is how do we approach it, right? Is it only a tool or is it something more? And I think we have to ask ourselves what we want to do with it. And it's a positive challenge for yourself. Do I use AI just to write because I'm too lazy to think about it? Or do I use it to become better? And that's a challenge people have now, to say, how will I live in a world where AI will be more and more dominant, right? Interconnected cars. I can't extract myself anymore from it, but it's me or me as a corporate. How do I leverage the best out of it? And I think this discussion is for me very important to help people to overcome the resistance and to embrace more the adoption of it.
Yeah. I think Marty mentioned something that was super interesting, because the robotics was termed coined to get people interested in technology. That was the original purpose of the word robots, right? So I think that's a powerful way of framing the whole discussion, is that like robots are supposed to be cool and technological driven, drive people to technology because they see the robots and they see the reflection of the robots in themselves and say, hey, they're just like me, right? But now the definition of robots have expanded so much that, like you said, if it's the hardware and that hardware has some automation to it, it has wheels on it, it moves by itself, is that not a robot? What about a car that just drives itself? That's a robot, right? So I think we're going to see an expansion of this definition, right? And this is one of the struggles that we're having with AI, is that we cannot define intelligence intelligently. Now we have this artificial intelligence that we don't know how to define either, right? Because we have mapped our genes in our body, but not necessarily our brain, because that's how complex the brains are, right? So we really have to define what robotic is and what to do about it, because we see it in the movies, right? You see iRobot, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Terminator, just name all the brand new movies in Netflix. They have either some AI mention or some robots in it, right? I think we're getting into the world where it's just going to be part of our life. But if we have it augmentative ways, the life is different versus the way the movies are portraying most of the time, which is like, military purposes other than, just doing my laundries, I guess, right? Folding my clothes. If there's a robot that folds my clothes, that's the one I really need first. So I think, why now? Like, what do we need to do today? Why now? Why is this time of 2025 so sensitive to you guys that we really need to start paying attention?
Well, as Dr. Hartman said, the speed.
Yeah.
So that period of rapid industrialization that he referred to as behemoth, probably for the people of the time, it seemed like it was light speed, because they were used to things just kind of being the same way. And you threshed wheat with a physical scythe, and all of a sudden you had a machine, and then next year was a machine that had 5 more ports to it. And then next year was a machine that could do 5 rows and also bale the stuff. And to them, it probably seemed like dizzying pace, right? Now it's happening so fast, it's really hard to be an expert in it. It's really hard to honestly say, I know what the state of robotics or the state of machine learning or the state of AI is. And I have this conversation with people around ChatGPT. I said, do you think that's AI 1.0, 2.0? And what do you think the US military, the Chinese military, the Russian military, what do you think they're on? Like 20.5? I mean, what you're seeing is the off-the-shelf COTS commercial, basic version of something that was incredible maybe 8 years ago, 9 years ago. But it's been improved on to such a great degree, and nobody knows that. And so what they're actually reacting to in AI is like the echo of AI. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the same thing when AI is applied to machine learning, which eventually may or may not be incorporated as something you refer to as a robot. And that makes people feel more comfortable because the change doesn't seem as fast. Because now, I mean, how many times have you had arguments with people about, I use ChatGPT. Well, I would never do that. I'd never touch that stuff. And then you have this conversation, and then 6 months later, you say, I did a letter. I thought it actually did a pretty good job. So they're converting, they're adopting, as Dr. Hartman said earlier. And that's the way human beings do it, right? Yeah. They have to touch it, feel it, not get burnt, not get electrocuted, and then go, okay, then find an application in their own lives that makes it real.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why it's so difficult to get your hands around the conversation.
Right.
The conversation is about lightning in a bottle, and the true experts that are on the leading edge of this development of robotics and AI, they're locked away someplace, and we're not hearing from them, and we're not going to know what they're working on for another 5 or 6 years until that becomes commonplace. So
Yeah,
I think everything we talk about.
I'm going to pause this for 1 second. I'm just going to take care of the baby for
that is, and kind of back to my earlier comments, all the conversation about AI, robotics, machine learning, if it's treated at the human level, if it's treated with an understanding of how humans react to things that are new, to change, it makes it easier for you to communicate and educate and inspire people, because you're not trying to do it as a shock and awe event. You're trying to illuminate things and give them insights without creating fear or creating concerns.
So, Dr. Hartman, I think we're talking about the how of it. So how can people cope with this? Or how can people, look at this and say, this is an advantage. This is not something that is revolutionary, but it's a slow process of getting to the point where we need to be in, right? What's your thought on that?
Well, it's a challenge. It's I think it depends on the personality. Some people are early adopters. Or people have more an explorative mindset, and they will embrace the uncertainty, the challenges which comes with it, and they will explore it, and they feel comfortable with it. While other people, which are more exploitative, will be more cautious. They are the followers, first looking what's happening and how they can apply the reasoning. I think the biggest challenge is to communicate what are the advantages. Automation was actually only really reasonable for organization because it made processes very fast, right? We could calculate huge amount of data faster than any person would be able to do. Pattern recognition in data, those advantages were absolutely the argument for companies to follow that path. And now we are in a point where we have to say how we want to push this further forward. Yeah. And so that it makes sense for people, right? Where do we start? We are not only on a brink and technology brink. We're also on a brink of who are we as humans, and automation can be very influenced by whoever programs, whatever data is available, and whoever feeds the data, right? So it's a very vulnerable place. We are giving away a lot of power of ourselves, and we have to challenge ourselves. How much do we want to trust? How much do we want to depend? And how can we create a joint synergy which is beneficial for both? Because if we can misuse AI, we can feed it with wrong data, or we can do it for something better. And this is a discussion which every society needs to do, right? What are we gonna do with it? I want to go back to system theory, the Ashby's law, because the degree of complexity increased so much that we need the interconnectivity. But that also needs trust. And in change management, even the single adoption to AI or similar programs to AI, it's trust. How can I trust it? How can I bring people to trust the system, which is, they don't know what's behind it. So I think as Marty said, is that it's very important to really leverage the benefits and really make it work for that people see the value it adds. and not taking away make people dependent on something that they don't have ownership anymore. I think that's from my experience.
Yeah, I think what you're describing is that, if you could figure out what's under the hood, you'll drive the car, right? You will say like, hey, I know there's an engine under the car. There's 4 tires. I'll drive the car. I'm very comfortable with it. I get used to it. I've been getting used to it, right? So I think this conversation that people need to be educated, right? When they get educated, what do you say to somebody who's in a professional world already? They're already working, because an engineer that's in high school, future engineer that's in high school today, they will start one way. What about the professionals that are already in their career, some in the midpoint, maybe someone in early fifth year of in the workforce? How do you address them to say like, this is where you start, right? Because the high schoolers, I think they have some opportunities to learn if they're just getting curious about engineering. But what about the professionals? Like, they're already at work. They have to make a decision for the future workforce that comes behind them, or to help them to be the best manager, directors down the road. What do we get them to start thinking through? Like, what's that mindset that we can help them with?
So in my third book, Be Different, the first 3 chapters talk about all the psychological and intellectual baggage we get from the conformity, the obedience to norms that we're hit with from about the time we're 6 or 7 years old, all the way through into our professional lives, right? You're told what to learn, how to learn. The example I usually use is maybe your parent or uncle taught you a different way to get to the outcome of a division problem. But in class, when you did it, you got an F because you didn't use this prescribed method. So what are you going to do the next time somebody shows you a unique way? You're not going to use it because you're not being rewarded for creative thinking. You're being punished. So the rule, the message, you get it eventually is, do what you're told, get along to get ahead. And then you get into the workspace and you're told where to sit, where to park, how long to work, what to wear to work, what meetings you can or can't go into. You go into the meetings and you raise your hand and you don't have the tenure. You're not in the right position in the org chart. You don't have the right title. And you're told, it'll be your day someday, but we don't need to hear your ideas. So this is a problem that is not a brain science issue. It's not a biological issue. It's a conditioning issue. So in Best Robotics, we also started to develop something called Best Mind Lab, which was taking the lessons we learned from kids going through these robotics competitions who didn't know the rules because they were too young. They hadn't been to engineering school. I went and watched the competitions and I said, well, they're bending and breaking or making up their own rules, and they're doing it in a collaborative way and they're communicating. And I talked to some of the engineers there. I assumed they were being taught, that they're being coached, that they're being mentored. And I said, no, that's not the way I would have approached it. And he goes, if you look here, if there's 20 teams, there's 20 different kinds of robots trying to achieve the same exact outcome on the competitive field. That kind of individual expression, right? So I wrote Be Different because I started talking to other experts in brain science and I realized that we've kind of shut that ability off in adults, but it's still there. It's not something that goes away with puberty. It's not something that goes away with age. So unless you have a medical problem with your brain function, so what you have to do is you have to open up your mind. You have to clear all that baggage out. You have to think clearly. And if you do that as an exercise, and it becomes a habit, what will happen is you start to get that creative process back. You start to be able to imagine again. And it's the imagination, which both tells you about threats and opportunities down the road, out on the horizon. And that's what's going to drive the answer to your question. That's what's going to drive current adult leaders in society to pay attention to the lack of talent coming out of the schools, the lack of understanding and awareness. And I'm talking about quality and quantity. Think about the discussion of AI or discussion of EVs. Once everybody kind of got their hands around it and opened their minds, they said, oh my God, if 80% of the cars on the road were EVs, we need 500 more nuclear power plants to power the whole thing. They started thinking about scale and resources and what has to be developed to be able to live and reach that imaginative outcome, right? Same thing with AI, with server farms and how much energy it takes to run AI systems and all that. That's a good thing. That means that they've bought into the value of it, and they're thinking bigger, and they're projecting it out, and they're realizing we're going to need a bigger boat. This is going to be a lot bigger.
Give me 1 second, guys. I'll be right back. All right, Dr. Hartman.
Yeah, no, I think every company should read the book Be Different. I would make it mandatory, because what I noticed in companies is they want, on the one side, learning curve, challenging, taking risks. On the other side, they are so risk averse because of shareholder pressure, because of competition. And when you really are trying to be different in a corporate culture, most cultures don't know how to handle be different. And that kills actually innovation and people willing to take the risk because they want to have a safe job. So there's a dilemma I notice more and more about people who really want to drive innovation forward, come with good ideas, maybe disruptive ideas. And only a few companies really can handle that kind of personality in their organizations. And it is a challenge for leaders, right? Because a person doesn't fit in in the norm. It's exhausting if somebody's disruptive. He comes from different angles. And if a leader is not able to manage that person gets disengaged. And you see a lot of people joining a company, being excited, coming with new ideas. And after the first half year, they are completely shut down because every time they come with a new idea with benchmarking, why Formula One can change a tire in a second and we can't have a call in 10 seconds. Why can't we learn from it? If you come with different ideas, which are not in the culture, in the industry they're in, you're dead. And that is killing innovation in companies. That's the reason why a lot of companies can't drive innovation as fast forward. It's not that they don't have the people. These people are those who are, I call it clay layers, under the clay layer, embedded in a framework which doesn't allow them to breathe. And that's the reason I would make it mandatory that everyone reads the book Be Different. Appreciate to be different. And it's not only a lip service. The only USP you have are your people. It's not your product. It's not the pricing. It's your people and their willingness to be innovative. And I think that is the good thing about AI and the robotics now, because it requires companies to listen to those who would not be listened to because they are just not mainstream.
You're on mute.
Yeah, happens in the Zoom, happens in StreamYard, happens everywhere. I'm on mute. All right. So what we've talked about probably came up in the conversation is the fact is what you see is a lot of technology that's being delivered, but what we don't see is the process. And of course, we don't see the people behind that process that's making this process so tight-knit. The technology looks very polished, or technology just looks worn out because the process wasn't really that great and the people weren't really into it, right? So I think the people, process, and technology side of things is where we really have to kind of go through the process of saying like, hey, if there's a data, where does data fit into? Is data technology or data just something that is in between the process? I think the whole process has to turn into data. Whole process has to be about AI. AI is not a technology being delivered. AI is a process, how the technology is being delivered, right? So when you think about a people, process, and technology, the people side of the equation gets always lost because they're kind of that hidden meaning behind the process to be successful, right? So I really do appreciate the fact that we have an author in the conversation, wrote a book about change management, and of course Dr. Hartman, you are a person who's been doing change management for a very long time. So change management, engaging with the people, engaging with the right stakeholder, engaging with that person who's going to make a good decision and follow through with that decision. I think that's a people sort of that emotional intelligence that we're really, really asking for. Not that we haven't asked for it before, but we have to ask for it specifically now, because the shift that is happening so rapidly requires that ability to say, like, as a leader, I can't get worn out, because that's what the leaders has been, is that they've been worn out so much because they've been able to deliver, but they had this delivered through months and years, quarter by quarter. In the AI space, all of a sudden it feels like 24 hours ago, whatever happened, nobody cares anymore because something else has come up and now everybody's all about it, right? And I mean, there's a point to it because that's more powerful. It's been trained better. It was in R&D for longer. It wasn't just hastily put together. It was a tight, polished service that came out. Everybody's like, hey, this one is better than that one, right? So to a specific example, like large language models are going through it today, right? Every time you open up LinkedIn, you see a new large language model, right? Now, new AI, multimodal, better at reading OCRs and all those things that are coming up. This is the future going forward, right? We're going to have all of this change because this AI is using data, provides the technology that is very, very effective, and is trying to address the fact that how can we do better, faster, and cheaper? Because we've been doing better, faster, and cheaper for decades now. Every month there's been better, faster, cheaper. But now it's so rapid, right? So I think emotional intelligence, the people side of the equation, really need to be the heart of the conversation, because we don't have that as a technological user. We have it somewhat because of Apple. Let's say, for example, we look at Steve Jobs and say, well, that's the person behind this technology. Or that's the person behind this technology. So we really have to put our people forward to say, whatever technology is being delivered, there's people behind it. And we kind of have to start shifting the conversation about people, how they deliver, and what are the expectations, and how do we improve that people's emotional intelligence to stay ahead of the curve, or at least keeping up with the speed, right? So give us your thoughts on that, because you guys written extensively on change management. I would love to learn a little bit more about change management, specifically the robotics, that change management. How do we capture that?
So my point of view is the B school approach is to address nonconformity and confusion and chaos with processes, procedures, and systems. And what you're basically saying is the way to solve what's going on is to establish new rules, new frameworks, which are rigid because they're there to control chaos, right? And that may do that in a situation, and it may do that for a period of time. I'm kind of jaded in this because I've seen that happen, and then the value of it drifts away within a year or so because more change happens. The universal rule, like Madame Curie said, the universe abhors stasis. So in my opinion, stability is an illusion, and anything you can do educationally, first to the leaders so they can then kind of drink the Kool-Aid and pass it on to the people that they lead, and then to the actual people involved in working and executing the behaviors, is that there's nothing that's static. There's nothing that's locked in. A rule that lasts for any longer than a year or two becomes a tradition without anybody naming it a tradition, and it becomes harder and harder and harder to address or break or modify. And what you're doing is you think you're solving one thing with structure, and you're not really, you're just postponing. And you're not helping the population. The population grasps onto the new structure. Okay, because you're not going to change anything else, right? This is it. We're going to do this now. Well, yeah, it's a false promise. So if you take the other way of doing it and you try to train, educate, mentor, coach organizations to create a culture where they're a little bit more on the balls of their feet, they're a little bit more nimble, a little more agile psychologically. This goes to the emotional IQ part. intellectually, which makes them more adaptable, right? It makes them actually also more resilient, because what affects human resilience is the assumption that something's not going to change, that they're in a safe spot, that they're stable, and stable is good. And if you can't maintain that, if you can't promise that, then you're just giving them a placebo. So I think if you actually go the other route, if the whole school system and education all the way up through the universities and into the commercial sector, and the government can pitch in on this, get people to be a little bit more open-minded, broader-minded, and realize that the real world is in a constant state of change, and get comfortable with that instead of embracing this other paradigm that doesn't really exist.
Yeah, absolutely. The versatility is required in my experience, and I noticed it in the last years. Normally, in a change approach, you start with a why, then the what and how. But because there's so many changes happening at the same time, that people actually don't care anymore about the why. They just say, "Tell me what and how." Especially the how is important, that they feel enabled and know what to do. The upskilling, the training becomes more and more important. And so that changes a little bit the change approach, because your communication and the transaction transformation is more focused on the low-hanging fruits, tangible success. And that creates, in an unstable world, the stability. If everything is volatile and moves around, but if from day to day I have small successes, incremental successes, that at least is something which is stable. So that's sort of a trick in change management, to make it when a lot of 6-7 changes happening at the same time, that if you can find everyday little pieces of success, that's what people keeps on motivating. Otherwise, it's overwhelming. And I think that is one ingredient which I learned to focus more on, is make it tangible, low-hanging fruit, not the big things, which the big boom, which excites people. It's just the day-to-day job. How can they survive? Because the change is added to the daily operations. And the question is, how much can you, the change fatigue. The challenge will be for our companies to keep to prevail the pace and the competition. How can I keep my company insane and be hungry, like in a marathon, to run on the next day the same marathon? Because that's what we are doing. You lead 5 work streams in 5 projects at the same time for big transformations. And then you expect people to do, in addition, something else. And you can only do so much without going into the risk of exhausting them if you make it really in small packages that they can handle it. Yeah. And I think that's what leaders should communicate and celebrate more, and acknowledge the accomplishments. Yeah. And the biggest challenge I see in addition to that is, yes, we have the changes happening every day, right? In a strategy meeting, they're setting up, we need to implement something new. But the performance measurements are not adjusted. So I was in a project where people actually worked against their own performance measurement system. So they were forced to do a change to support the change program, while it's in opposite to what they're measured in their performance and saving their job. So the business model needs to be aligned to keep with the pace, right? To be in synchronicity with the pace happening. And I think that is what what we mentioned before about this kind of agile mindset. It's also an agile framework. So it's now a learning curve, and that comes with the complexity in a system and the speed and scaling to manage this. That's a learning curve for organization. How, as a company, can we adapt to that in the most comfortable way without losing the best players in our team?
Let's pause for 1 second.
Oh, I got it.
All right. So there's something that we really need to do right now is to talk about best robotic, because I find best robotics to be one of the fascinating things that I wasn't familiar with when I was in high school, right? And now that I see it, I said like, oh my goodness, I wish I knew about that. But let's talk about best robotic. Give me a take on best robotic.
So Best Robotics was created by two Texas Instrument engineers in Texas 32 years ago. And their brainchild was try to come up with a competitive environment that was stimulating to young people grade 6th through 12th grade, that would create a yearning, a desire, a hunger for technology and things around technology, like just pure science, mathematics, things that lead to technology. And that's really the theme of Best Robotics. It has competitions all over the United States. The students that participate don't have to pay for the competition. There's several other big robotic competitions in the country, but the students all have to pay upwards of $2,000 to $3,000 to compete. So everything's covered by donations, and it's just been sustained for 32 years. So besides the socioeconomic advantage to not having to pay to get involved in this, the competition is somewhat freewheeling. It creates an experiential transformative event, and the students work on it for about 8 weeks. They know what the end state competitive environment, they call it the field. They have to build a robot, a machine that interacts with the field with cranes and lifting bars and different things and accoutrements on the machine. And it has to be programmable, and it has to be controlled through like a game joystick. And 4 teams go out at a time, and they compete against each other on 4 separate elements of the same competitive challenge. There's referees wearing referee shirts standing there, and there's people walking around with clipboards, and they get scored for how many of these tasks their robot completes. So this isn't robots fighting robots or anything like that. And then there's an overarching theme where each year, I'll give you a good one. Last year it was the Da Vinci method of surgery, which I had on me when I had cancer in my kidney, and so I had a Da Vinci operation where the doctor was in some other room someplace, and there was a machine over the top of me with all kinds of probes. And so we reproduced that. Our engineers reproduced that by putting a human form on the floor of university gymnasiums, is where the competition's held. And then the robot had to do things, kind of like the game Operation, where they had to go and they had to insert something or take something out or move something around and interact with the human body. The year before that, it was supply chain logistics. So there's a changing theme every year. The teams have to create a business. They have to run that business, have to create a marketing plan. They have to create a website. They have to create a convention booth. And then that's part of the competition. So on Fridays, there's teams that are in the convention booths that they created doing pitch sessions to judges that are walking around and checking them off on like 25 different elements, just like they were a corporation, like it was Raytheon or something, and how well they presented the company, the products and services, et cetera. And at the same time, in another part, there are students wearing suits and ties and dresses, giving a complete marketing pitch, which in the element of their marketing pitch, they also introduce their website, walk through the website, and they're being scored by a panel. The second day is where they actually do the robotics competition. And that robotics competition allows them to go out and compete. They're very short runs, like 60 seconds, 120 seconds. They come back off the field, and the next teams go out. And the team has 2 people out there during the competitive period. The rest of the team is watching, taking notes. As soon as they come back, it's like NASCAR, like a pit crew. They're allowed to rapidly prototype and correct anything they thought they needed to correct. They can extend the arm of the crane. They can add 2 more hooks. And so they got Dremel tools and plywood and PVC pipe and all kinds of materials. And they're just going crazy because they might have 30 minutes before they have to go back out for round 2. And this is happening in an entire like college basketball stadium environment with thousands of people there cheering. I mean, a friend of mine and Jen's, Michael Steiner, told me the first time I went to one, you better bring earplugs because it's like a nonstop pep rally. It's just a roar from the minute it starts. So lots of excitement, right? And I thought the engineers were actually telling the kids how to do this, that there was some mentor someplace. And it turned out there wasn't. In the 8 weeks they're preparing all this, the mentors in the schools, there's rules. They can't tell them what to do. They can't teach them what to do. They can only help them with getting the materials and stuff. And therefore, in my observation, it was creativity that was kind of unbound by rules. They were bending and breaking rules. They were ignoring rules because they didn't know the rules because they never went through an engineering school. And yet they were still accomplishing the task. So great expression of human imagination and reimagining, in the moment with the prototyping. And Best Robotics has been doing that for a long time. Most of the alumni for the last 32 years go into technology companies, or they go into teaching science and mathematics. We have lots of alumni that come back years later and help. Some of them are on our board. And so the cool thing about that is, and there's a reason why I wrote the third book, Be Different, was that is something that could be done in a regular school environment and not as part of a special competition related to a nonprofit. That could be a methodology, as I mentioned earlier, with adults. No rules. Go in a room and just try to fix this problem, try to solve this problem. Not because that's the best way to solve all problems, but that's a really good way. It's a catalyst to opening your mind and being acceptable of other people's ideas and inputs. And you get into a mode of experimentation. And in business, experimentation is considered really high risk and high resource cost. So they limit that, whether it's a thought experimentation or real experimentation. Like Elon Musk blows up a couple of rockets and people forget that in the 60s, NASA blew them up every other day. Just trying to figure little things out, right?
Dr. Hartman?
Yeah, no, that what actually was attracting me. That's, if I would have a company, that would be the ideal company where really you can throw in teams from different departments and give them a month or half a year just to explore, unconditional. And actually in Germany, there is the Max Planck Institute. And the reason why they were so successful in their research is because their funding was not under any conditions. You got funding from someone and you can do your research, whatever you think is interesting. And while compared to the classical university, you got a funding for your project. So you had already predefined a path because the money was allocated to that research path. And I think the way is to, even if it's risk and high costs involved and the shareholders will not like it, I think that approach and Best Robotics really is the best case and shows that it works. The return on investment will be way higher if companies would allow to test and experiment. Because otherwise, you can't be disruptive if you want to have security. You have to there's no compromise. You have to make a decision. Either we want to be innovative, that means high risks, high costs, maybe the success is limited, but if we are successful, we are disrupting the market, or you want to play it safe. And that is something where I hope that Best Robotics and all those who went through it and become the next leaders will create that kind of culture of risk-taking, that they say, I want people in my team who disrupt. I take all the risk on my shoulders because I know it's going to worth it.
Yeah, I think Best Robotic, I think, represents the need, not just in high school, but all throughout. Because if you think about R&D, R&D happens kind of secretively, right? We need to have that environment where, in AI specifically, we talk about the fact that we really need all the stakeholders, all the data owners, all the business process owners to be involved. Because if you give it to the CEO and CFO and data scientists to do AI, they're going to come up with an outcome, but it's not going to be the only outcome, the best outcome, or the one that everybody can buy into, right? So this buy-in process that you guys just described, that 20 teams, one output, get to that one output, all 20 teams are trying 20 different things. So I think that's a spirit that we really need in a corporate environment to say, hey, guys, everybody, let's do this, right? Let's put our thoughts into it. Corporate environment tries to mimic that, but I don't think it's that successful, right? Pause for 1 second. So after all the things that we have learned today, I think there's only one thing to do, right? Is to go to bestrobotic.org, robotics.org, and engage. If you're a parent and this is the first time you heard about Best Robotics, today's the day, right? Sign up, join them, follow them on social media, connect with their post, because it's such an impressive, feat to say, how do we prep the next generation of workforce? How do we develop the next generation of workforce? Well, next generation of workforce is my kids. I'm a parent, so I'm going to sign them up. Whatever school that they go to, I'm going to make sure they have Best Robotics there, right? They have access to Best Robotics. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to all good things that comes out of Michael Steiner's leadership and Dr. Hartman and Marty Strong's leadership, because really we need more of engineering understanding, data understanding, pretty much just a STEM way of understanding, because that's who are the successful bunch these days, right? The engineers. You have to have an engineering thought process. You have to understand the process very well. So with that, I think, I would love to hear from you guys on what else we can do on top of engaging with Best Robotics. And if we do engage with Best Robotics, how will we do more? And this has been a amazing conversations, and I'm looking forward to the future ones, because I'm pretty sure we're going to have to do another podcast before the next event at Best Robotics.
Yeah, it sounds good. Yeah, and it's a donor-led organization, and the donor monies are what pay for the kids to participate and go through that transformation. So go to the same, bestrobotics.org and see if you can help. If every dollar helps, and every dollar can change a kid's life.
Yep, that's well said, Dr. Hartman.
Yeah, I think especially the IT and tech companies should really start to be engaged with Best Robotics, and if they want to tackle the war for talents, I think it's worthwhile to ask how they can support the next generations, and not only complaining in Harvard reviews about they have no talents and engineers anymore. Be actively engaged and help the next generations.
So powerful, right? Because we are moving into the world of semiconductor chips in USA. And Dr. Hartman, what you just said is very important, that we don't have enough engineers for semiconductor chips. Really, we don't. We have to develop them. We have to develop them here. Robotics are the best way to teach a kid about how powerful the semiconductor chips can get. Your robot's heating up. Why? Because of semiconductor chips. Whatever the case is. So, look, sometimes when we do podcasts at the end, we just feel like so scary future, such a dystopian world is coming. This has been a utopian kind of a podcast where everything is just, your brain is just murmuring with an understanding of what the future would look like, because the people in the future are going to be far more educated than I was in high school, because they're already getting the majority of the education that I don't even have at this professional age, right? So I'm really am excited, and if you can feel that. So with that being said, I'm looking forward to next conversation. Until next week, folks, stay tuned. More episodes of podcast is coming, and I'm looking forward to our featured guest. And if you are loving this podcast, follow us on YouTube, follow us on LinkedIn, and engage. Tell us, you want to be part of the guest roster, and then you want to discuss a specific topic. And that specific topic does not have to have any AI to it, doesn't have to have any technicality to it. It's just what it is that you want to discuss. And that's what we will talk about. We'll talk about an AI podcast with a little bit of AI spin to it. So next week, we'll see you guys again soon. Take care.
Take care.